Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk about communication in the natal chart and kind of where to look for this. This is a question that does come up in readings with people that people have. How can I be a better communicator? Or what's the best way for me to communicate? Those kinds of questions. And it's a good question because communication is very, very, very important in all areas of life. So, there are people that want to, maybe they feel like they are good communicators, but they'd like to be better. And then there are people that maybe feel like they aren't such great communicators and they'd like to get better at it. So, it's an important question. And if I do a lot of doing all this, it's cold as fuck here today. I love the cold. I love it. But it's I don't know, yesterday it was 80 degrees. Today it's in the 30s. It's fucking weird, but I love it. So, but if I am snotting around, hopefully not too much, that's why. So, okay. There are different places in the chart that you can look for in terms of communication, specifically. Mercury, where Mercury is in the chart, by sign and house and aspects made. A planet is what needs to be expressed. The house is where or what area of life something needs to be expressed in. And the sign is how energy needs to be expressed, how something needs to be expressed. So Mercury is a what in that. So Mercury is what needs to be expressed. Mercury is other things too, but it is communication. Communication is what is needing to be expressed. Generally speaking, there are a lot of different ways that you can go with the planets, with the signs, with the houses. There are, because there just are. But Mercury does generally indicate something about communication. I would say almost universally. Mercury wants to communicate. So Mercury is definitely somewhere that you would want to look. Now, depending on what house that falls in, my Mercury, for instance, my Mercury is in the 11th house. So my Mercury wants to communicate, say, with groups of people, online, since the 11th house also has an affinity with the internet. My Mercury wants to communicate long-term goals, those kinds of things. In those areas of life, that's where Mercury wants to communicate. 11th house is other things too, but that's, you get the idea. And then the sign would be how Mercury wants to communicate. So my Mercury is in Scorpio, so it wants to communicate, say, long-term goals deeply, intensely, powerfully, controlled, all of those kinds of, and other things too that Scorpio represents, but you get the idea. So where Mercury falls in the chart you do need to look at that for communication. Absolutely. Should be one of the first places that you look. And then depending on what aspects it makes, if it conjuncts anything, if it opposes anything, if it squares anything, trines anything, whatever, that will also flavor everything going on with Mercury. Now the next place that you'd want to look, Gemini also deals, the way Gemini is how. Gemini is a how. So whatever house cusp that Gemini is on, that area of life might be expressed more talkative. You might be more talkative in that area of life, or more communicative in that area of life. So I would definitely look at what house cusp Gemini falls on too, what house it's on the cusp of. That can help flesh that out even further. And then by dispositions, whatever house Gemini is on the cusp of, right, that house will then bend to where Mercury falls in the chart, which will help give you an even better idea of how Mercury functions on its own and how that, you know, what's going on with whatever house is on the, whatever house Gemini is on the cusp of in the chart. So you definitely want to look at that too. The other place that you'd want to look would be the third house. The third house is also, the third house is areas of life or where. Third house also deals with communication. Absolutely does. And learning. They say the lower mind. I don't really think that's a very nice term. But more like logic and reason, that sort of stuff. Whereas the ninth house is more abstract thought, higher mind, that sort of thing. But yeah, you definitely want to look at the third house. Now, depending on what, now unlike Mercury, that always seems to have something to do with communication. The third house, you may or may not feel like communication is a major deal. I mean, because the third house, like I said, it can also be learning, it can be thinking, it can be short distance travel, things like that. So while communication usually does exist here, it usually is something that you bring into play. It doesn't always have to be, but it generally is too, but it doesn't have to be. Whereas Mercury usually, where Mercury falls in the chart, usually does seem like it deals with communication most of the time. So the third house, let's say you had let's say you had Aries on the cusp of the third house. The person might communicate and share information in more independent ways, in more driven ways, perhaps even more aggressive ways, assertive ways. You might be looking at somebody that functions more that way. And then, I don't know, let's say you had, then you'd want to look at, I don't have that card at, then you'd want to look at where Mars falls in the chart, since Mars is the planetary ruler of Aries. And let's say Mars was in, I don't know, let's say Mars was in the 11th house in, do I have that card? I do have that card. Let's say Mars was in the 11th house in Leo. So that third house, that the way somebody communicating in more independent ways, communicating in more driven ways or more assertive ways, is then going to bend or bestow its power, however you want to say it, to Mars in Leo in the 11th. So this might come out fiercely in groups. This might come out, they might really lead groups. There might be like a, wanting to really lead groups in this way. They might be pretty bold with their long-term goals, with getting those out there, with communicating those. That also seems possible. Yeah, any of those things. But you could use play around with any of the keywords and see which ones fit the best for you in the particular chart that you're looking for, or in your particular case. If we're looking, sorry, shit's blown away. If you're looking at, your own chart. Let's say you had, we'll do one more and then I'm going to go because shit's starting to blow away. Let's say you had Capricorn on the cusp of the third house. Communication, there might be more of a mature bent to it, like the way they, communication just might be done more maturely, there might be more authority to it. There might be more mastery to it. The person could also end up feeling kind of, say, there could be limitations. They might feel limitations or restrictions. It's possible. It is possible. It doesn't have to go that way, but I have seen it go that way. Yeah, so those sorts of things. And then let's say you had Saturn, planetary ruler of Capricorn. Let's say you had Saturn in the 11th house in Virgo. I don't know if I've got the Virgo card. Oh, I do. But yeah. Let's say you had Saturn in the 11th house in Virgo. So let's say they felt more, let's say they had Capricorn on the 3rd house cusp, and they took that more in the limitation, in feeling limited or like restricted in communication. Like, so if they felt that way, and then you've got Saturn in the 11th in Virgo, they might not communicate as much in groups of people. They might not communicate their long-term goals as much. They might be rather critical of these. This is possible. If Capricorn on the cusp of the 3rd house seemed more like masterful or mature, even, they still might not be, with Saturn in the 11th in Virgo, they still might not put themselves out there in like groups and with social causes and things like that as much. But when they do, they're probably going to make sure it's perfect or very precise. Yeah, those kinds of things. But again, you'd want to take the entire chart into account. Also, any planets that fall in the houses that you're in, like the 3rd house would color this. Any planets that fall in the house where the planetary ruler of the 3rd house falls will also color it. So you don't want to take the whole thing into account. But these are just some things that you can look at for communication in the natal chart. Definitely take a look. If you feel like leaving comments about your own communication through your natal chart, what it looks like, I'd love to hear. But yeah, I'm gonna get going. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck With Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Apaterno Astrology on Instagram. If you want to like or subscribe or whatever the fuck people do with videos on YouTube, you can find us by searching for Let's Fuck With Astrology in the YouTube search bar. And if you're already watching this on YouTube, you can like and subscribe below. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck With Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Holy shit. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.